Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the LiftAffect podcast. I am your host, Matt McNeil, founder, clinical director, and director of human performance at LiftAffect, where we assist professional pilots with maintaining better mental health and optimizing their mental skills. The goal of this podcast is simple: to help pilots and other high liability professionals and disciplines come out of the shadows to discover how we can live better lives personally and professionally. Join us each episode as we discuss various topics ranging from mental health, mental skills and performance, to business, entrepreneurship, and a few other surprises along the way.
Motivation. What is it? Why do some people have it? Why do some people lose it? And what do you do to get it back? That today is the topic of our discussion. Welcome to the latest episode of the LiftAffect podcast, where along with motivation, where you're dealing with your two semi-tired hosts here, Karl Keller and Matt McNeil. Hey, buddy.
Hey,
I guess
it's going to be a mess.
Yeah.
I'll wake you up if you fall, and just do the same for me.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
A little low on energy today.
Yeah, it's been a long week.
Yep.
Dude, I thought we'd talk about something that you in the pre-show were mentioning that you'd gotten some calls on this week, and figured we'd get right into it and talk about it, because it is a subject that I think is relevant and everybody has their valleys and peaks in it, and me is, I feel like, especially, and that's motivation. And I'm just going to kind of let you go right to it, and we can riff from there. But
sure.
The calls were about motivation and the lack thereof, or the frustrations about things. So,
and I think, I'll add this. So motivation, I pair. See, I told you I'm tired. I pair commitment with that as well. People sometimes call and they want to come especially for mental skills coaching, related issues with flight performance or ground training performance, is they will say, it seems like I'm lacking motivation, or I'm actually lacking some commitment to stay engaged in what it is. So there's a difference, though, between motivation and commitment. Motivation is the push that gets people going. And for many people, just getting started is the hardest part. Especially if you've been sitting on ice. I see a lot with training issues where somebody may have a training failure, and then they got to wait for the check airman or the training department to figure out when they're going to retrain them and get them scheduled with the check airman. And what happens is and I'm sure in other professions this can happen as well, you sit on the sidelines for a while, waiting for them to try to coordinate how to get the retrain happening.
That would that fall in with something like that occurring? Where does anxiety and apprehension fall into
that's
that?
That's a huge question. Oh my God, it's all over. Anxiety and apprehension is all over that.
Right, but I mean, how does that play with the motivation angle specifically?
It can create trepidation, but for me, motivation is what is the push that gets people going, and it's sort of like Newtonian physics. An object in motion tends to stay in motion, and an object at rest tends to stay at rest. And it's hard to get. You can sort of become the couch potato mentally, by sitting on the couch for too long. So I think getting started is a hard part, and it's the hardest part. So just helping people say, all right, we'll get into that in a second. So but motivation is the push that gets you going. And then commitment is then what keeps you going once you're actually going. So there's a difference there. Commitment makes no sense. And I see this go wrong all the time, is people want to get into goals and goal setting and what are you going to do it's all this commitment related stuff. But if the motivation isn't there, commitment is a waste of time. It's not going to work. And you're sort of just committing to being unmotivated. So you need to get your motivation up first.
So I guess I should be, motivated to commit to you.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, So, but so you've got motivation is the precursor to commitment. So there's a lot of myths, I think, around motivation, and some of the motivational speakers and some of these, some of them are okay. Tony Robbins is cool. There's nothing wrong with Tony Robbins, but there's some motivational guys are just like, it's all like rah rah, and everybody's jacked up for a minute, and then
the heat of the moment.
Yeah, and then they go home and they just go right back to sitting on the couch. So
what was that all about? Right. I don't know.
I forgot.
I forgot.
So motivation. One myth around motivation is people think motivation comes before you get started, meaning I've got to be motivated to get started or I can't get started. Actually, not true. Oftentimes, motivation comes after you start a new behavior, not before. So, can you think of an example in your life? I can think of some in my life where type ratings, right? It's like something like, oh my God, this is just not what I want to be doing with my time. This sucks. But I'm just going to show up and just whatever. I'm going to be there and I'm not going to like it. But then you get in there and you start to kind of get immersed, and then your motivation starts to you start getting more motivated, especially with peer, influence, and you sort of see what it's going to allow you, and you just get started, and then you're like, I feel my motivation meter is starting to crank up.
I can give you one that I think kind of goes for both of us, I think, and that was this podcast.
Oh yeah. Oh, let's talk about it. Yep.
Just the way that this kind of went about as far as trying to increase the reach of the audience, because there's only so much of you to give, as far as and of your practice that you wanted to sit there and do that, and we were talking about it, and I said, well, what about a podcast? And we just there were some very valid reasons why it didn't happen, but we kept talking about it, and finally, I remember the one comment, and you kind of went, because I used it against you, because you used it on me, and that is, 3, 2, 1, go. And that was kind of the motivation. Let's just take that first step, and then just start walking, and then you turn around and go, look, we actually got somewhere, and now we're pushing. We're coming up on a year now, and it took that kind of to get motivated to go, what, by God, if I don't start it, it's definitely not going to happen. But yet this is something I want. I want to reach more people. And that this became the tool, and that we had to kind of talk through it and get to that point where you go, what, by God, today's the day.
Yep.
And I think that was the gist of it.
That was, motivation there was a lot of motivation to not do it because of the commitment.
The time,
the effort,
the money,
and the cost, and it's a lot of work. But I think but you just get started. And you did nail me with 3, 2, 1, go, and I deserved it because I nail you with it all the time. And it was like, let's go, just do it. 3, 2, 1, let's go.
And we had no idea what this was going to, how this was going to be received and how we would do. We didn't even have an idea on the format. It just was, let's go out there, and you made a comment, and I want to bring this up, and that is, so many people want to dot every I, cross every T, and want it to be perfect. And I think good is the enemy of perfect, because sometimes if you wait for it to be perfect, it'll never happen. You'll never do it. And so we just say sloppy success. And that's what we did here. We just went out there and we didn't know how this was going to work. We had to switch the different apps that we used. There was a fair amount of trial and error just to get to where we are. Yep. And we're still evolving.
And it was, at one point we had transferred hosts over, and we lost all of the, it was like, 15, 20 episodes in, and we switched everything over. And by the way, people, please start rating the podcast. Just click on the like button. That's all I'm asking you to do, because they put a ridiculous amount of emphasis on the amount of visibility a podcast gets based on how many listens it gets and likes. And we had a huge momentum in the beginning, and when we transferred over, we lost all of it. All of the data and the algorithms were zeroed out, and that was like, oh my God, it was like starting over, and it was like, okay, 3, 2, 1, let's go.
And you know what? I'll even accept a dislike, because at least it tells us what you don't want to hear more.
Right.
But please give us feedback.
Yeah.
This is, we get comments, but we really want to have feedback.
They'll email me. They'll take the time to write an email, but they won't just hit the star button on there. It's crazy. So, okay. But anyways, back to motivation. So a big common misperception is motivation comes before you get started. Another misconception is just write down your goals. If you just write them down, success is going to be guaranteed. That's a common thing. Well, I wrote down and I made my vision board and I did all this stuff and I didn't achieve it. And that's, I think people think of it as that's the secret method. I don't remember something called The Secret. Remember when that came out? The Secret.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And look, that's fine. I think people actually misunderstood that book. It was by Rhonda Byrne, I think her name was, or something like that. People misunderstood what it was, but just writing down your goals is not going to be enough. You're going to have to do more. Another misperception is just try to do your best. That's not going to work either. That's not a good motivator. It encourages, without putting on too much pressure. Just do your best, right? Yeah, it's fine to say that to your children, right? When you're trying to support them when they're learning. But at higher levels of performance and expectation, just trying to do your best is may not be the best strategy. And then another one is just visualize success. That isn't going to be enough either. You need to visualize success, and visualization is a huge technique that can be used in mental skills training that we do use. But just trying to visualize it is not going to be enough. So that's some misnomers about motivation. So then let's get into, well, then what the hell what do you need to get motivated?
I want to hit one more thing before you hit that part, and that is also I don't want to say mental state, but your physical state. I think if you're exhausted and tired and not getting enough sleep, I think motivation becomes exponentially more difficult. So part of it is also, are you getting enough rest, and are you in the proper state of mind to tackle whatever it is that you want to start with? Because like you say, once you get started, then it's a little bit different story. But if you're constantly in the mindset that, God, just one more thing on my plate, I think it makes it that much harder. So I think getting good rest or being in that good physical state is no important
doubt
for the beginning.
Oh yeah. If like I've said this before, when I don't sleep well, I am life is a different experience than not. And it's sometimes you just can't get good sleep, and I can appreciate that. And you got to work with what you got. But take that into account when you're like, why am I so unmotivated? Okay, well I didn't get good sleep. I haven't been sleeping well. Well, that's probably a factor. You got to overcome it. You can still get your motivation up even when the tank is half empty. There's some ways to do that, which we're going to get into, but
don't use it as an excuse.
Yeah, it's an explanation, not an excuse. So here's some things that good questions, and you need to write these down on a piece of paper when you're trying to increase your motivation. One is, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? If you've lost touch, and when we're unmotivated, we've probably lost touch with why we're doing it in the first place. Go back and reconnect with why. And look, maybe there's no good reason why you're doing it. Maybe you shouldn't be doing it.
What's the desired goal?
What's the desire? What's the point? Why are you doing this? What do you want to accomplish in your career or your whatever you're trying to get motivated in? This is just, I'm saying that because people have said I'm unmotivated in this rating course, or I'm unmotivated in my career, or whatever it is. What do you want to accomplish? What do you enjoy most about it? Can you reconnect with some of that? What are your biggest challenges that you're facing? When have you been most motivated in the past, in this domain that you're struggling in? Success is repeatable. You've just got to be able to identify patterns. And so when was your motivation really high? What was going on for you then? What are the biggest challenges you have in sustaining the motivation and the commitment it takes to be kind of operating at your best. Is it, I'm not sleeping well? Is it psychosocial factors? Is it physiological? Is it, what is the biggest challenge? What's your, we call them in V1, we call them our innervators. What is the disruptor to your motivation? I can tell you mine, man. Here's mine. It's right here. I'm holding up my phone, right? Digital addiction is just,
I think this is a key one because as a good example, you have when you start out, you have your goal. I'm going to get my pilot's license. I'm going to become a professional airline pilot, whatever it is. And
or doctor or surgeon.
Yeah,
I get a lot of other professionals saying, I am so unmotivated in my career, you know?
But you know what happens? I think what causes a lot of that is you achieved your goal. You became that doctor. And now all of a sudden going, well, I achieved it. And it's like, what now? Where, you know, is this as good as it gets? And that sitting down and going, okay, that was an intermediate goal, not the end goal. And I think sometimes people look at that as just, that's the end spot. Everything, it just stops. Whereas no, that's just a waypoint along the way. And if you don't take that mindset, I think that becomes, no kidding, a stop sign. Well, now what? I've achieved it. I can die well now, you know. I flew with an airline. I flew with a captain who said that. I said, well, what do you want to do? He says, I don't really know. I've achieved every goal I've ever set. That I'm done. I said, I don't really, I don't know what to do. And I thought, wow. I didn't want to.
You know, that's going to be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, but that's what he said. He goes, he was I don't even know why I was flying. He was a centimillionaire. I mean, he owned hotels all over the United States and Europe. I mean, he goes, I do this because I'm bored. I don't know what else to do. I got nothing. He farmed everything else. He's like, everybody, he had all these people that worked for him and did all of this stuff. And he goes, I just don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm going like, did you set your goals too low? Now, I mean, obviously, centimillionaire, he achieved an awful lot, but it's like, you know, so I think that's a big thing is sometimes when you get there, a lot of people that you hear this from, I know I've reached that point. I was going, okay, I became that airline pilot. Now what? Mm-hmm. Do I just rest on my laurels and I kind of just cruise? Now I'm on autopilot?
That has been a big thing for me is when I'm sort of like, the process is always more, when I learned that the process is more meaningful than the outcome, meaning the journey to getting there is where all the goods are. Getting it is usually really insignificant.
It's almost anticlimactic.
Oh, it is. Sometimes. You're like, oh, you know, and I am like, okay, I did it. And I'm like on to the next thing because I want to grow. Now I used to chase, you know, I would chase extrinsic motivators and it was wrecking my life. I mean, it made me a very unhappy person when I was extrinsically motivated. I didn't have intrinsic motivators. There's nothing wrong with extrinsic motivators. But if you're solely focused on extrinsic, you're going to achieve them and it's not going to be enough. You're going to be like, oh, why do I feel so empty? And when you do that enough, you can get really depressed because you can be like, well, crap, nothing works. Like I could achieve everything and I'm still going to be depressed and still be anxious and feel like it's not enough. It's like, yeah, there's an intrinsic lack that's going on.
It's the thrill of the kill. And then it's like, now what?
Now what? So higher purpose is a big, I think the research shows that if you're not contributing something to somebody else, it's going to be very difficult to be happy. If you're just buying the cars and watching the numbers increase in your bank account with no way to use that to make somebody else's life better, it's not going to work. But okay, so what do you do now? You ask these questions, you figure out, okay, I'm going to reconnect with why I'm doing this in the first place. And maybe I shouldn't be doing it. You know, maybe it's, I'm ready to move on. I don't know. That's a personal question. Get some coaching, get some therapy on it. But now you need to make it easy to start. Now, obviously it depends on the skill level. At the primary level, when it's something new, and that might just mean a new type rating, right? You're new to this airplane. It's all new to you. That you could still be considered primary in that domain, but you got to use your discretion. But if it's new to you at some level, you need to make it really easy to start. we always overestimate what we can accomplish in a week, but we underestimate what we can accomplish in a year. That's because we have this tendency to go make something. We want to go for the, you know, we want to take the biggest leap in the beginning. Bad idea. Start small.
It can be overwhelming. I mean, just be an airline pilot, or just be a pilot. Forget about an airline pilot. There's all these milestones that you have to achieve before you get there. And like you say, if you take them incrementally, piece by piece, knowing that all of those added up together get you where you're going, all of a sudden it seems to be a little bit more manageable because I can achieve a small piece. You know, I can study this piece. I can get this written exam out of the way. I can solo. You know, those are intermediate steps along the way that, like you say, you turn around and go, look how far I've gotten. If you're looking at just how come I don't have my, private pilot's license yet? If that's your first intermediate goal, I think it's gonna be a much tougher goal as an example to achieve than if you use those small pieces in between and use those and celebrate those.
Yeah, well, one of my mental skills coaches was working with a client, and I was talking to this morning, and he's like, talking to this guy, and he just keeps talking about, flying the big metal, and it's like, dude, you're in private pilot training. Like let's I mean, that's fine to have that as a motivator, but that is, and he's totally unmotivated, right? He can't get up off the couch and can't, he had a training issue that he, decompensated on, and then he's got to go back and can't find the motivation. And it's like, well, let's make this easier. Let's make this easier to start. Forget let's go for the solo. How about this solo? Let's make that the goal. That's what we're going to work toward.
And that's a hell of a goal, I'll be honest with you.
That's a hell of a goal. And
the first time you solo?
Right. Oh my God.
Oh my God. You couldn't stick a pin up anything.
No.
Per se.
For sure. So yeah, you're puckered, man. But it's, and even at the advanced level, maybe your motivator is too far down the road. Let's do something smaller. So you make it small, but all right. Secondly, motivation and commitment are daily decisions. They're not one decision and then it's into the future. They're daily decisions. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't, if you brush your teeth once a week, it'd be pretty gross. Yeah. It's pretty nasty. And that's what lack of motivation is. Well, you're doing something, trying to make a decision to increase your motivation once a week. That's silly. You've got to do something daily. And so one good way to increase your motivation is create a highlight reel that you can refer to. Now, what is a highlight reel? It can be YouTube videos. It could be podcasts. It could be something that you read. I think a mixture of all those things. If you want to get your motivation up, go and watch others that are doing it or talking about doing it or explaining about it or, that are immersed in it, and start to wash yourself with some of that on a daily basis. That ups your motivation tremendously with anything that you do.
Positive reinforcement.
Seeing, what is possible, hey,
but
this is what's
wouldn't
possible.
You start looking at it as almost commitment too, instead of just motivation? Because you've started, you're in it.
Well, you're not committing to shit at that point. You're just watching it. I mean, you're just
I'm talking about if you're saying you've already started and every day, isn't that part of commitment? Staying the course?
You can have a commitment to continuing to keep your motivation up. But I'm saying to get motivated. So here's an example. Let's use an example from a flight student. Well, you're not motivated. You had a training failure, so you've been sitting on ice, and tell me what you've been doing, right? Well, playing Xbox. Okay. Well, have you been watching any, when you first wanted to become a pilot, when you started doing this, what were you watching? I was watching YouTube videos and watching, training videos and watching instruction and guys landing planes and okay. And what else do you do? Well, I was going out to the airport and I was watching airplanes take off and land and hanging out. And I was listening to liveatc.net. It was kind of cool. I was learning how to, right. And you weren't even flying that, but you were super motivated to start your flight training, right? Yeah. Okay. Repeat that. That's motivated. That's motivation.
That's getting back to your roots almost.
Why reinvent the wheel? I mean, we see this in business stuff, like you'll talk to somebody where they were like, well, what first quarter earnings were great. Well, what was your sales strategy? Well, we're doing this, this, and this. Okay. Second quarter earnings went to shit. What did you change? Well, we changed our sales strategy. Okay. Go do the first sales strategy.
Note to self.
Yeah, right. Just start what? Why are you reinventing the wheel? You know what worked before. Go do that again.
Incredibly self-critiquing.
Right. Think about it. When you have projects at home that you really want to do, like I really want to build that garage in the back, or I want to put in the new deck, or put in the hot tub, or the cold plunge, and then you lose your motivation. It's like, well, what were you doing when you got super motivated? Well, I was watching these videos on people, YouTube videos on how to put in a cold plunge, and then I went over to my buddy's house who's got one. Okay, well, go do that again. Guess what? Do you think you're going to come home and sit back on the couch and be a couch potato? Probably not.
Right? Be wired.
Yeah, it's like, so I think it's really like go and create a highlight video.
Do you know what else helps? Is to surround yourself with people that have similar desires and goals.
Totally.
Because now you're kind of leveraging each other, and there's accountability, and there's the collective enthusiasm that you're not in it by yourself, and you're not like all alone. That I think can help a lot if you have that ability to surround yourself with similar like-minded people.
It's the point I'm trying to make is that motivation are daily decisions that you make. They're not one big move and you got it. It's that do a little a lot, don't do a lot a little is how you start to get, increase your motivation. And I would say, we've all had times where we've been motivated, and go back and look and say, what was I doing that led me to be motivated?
Yeah.
You had some kind of internal highlight reel. With professional athletes, we have them they create a highlight reel of their best performances. And it's just clips. You never watch a highlight reel of bad performances. Like, here's the time I struck out at the plate. There's no highlight reel of that. It is every hit on base, every home run you hit, every grand slam, every successful bunt, and they will put a 2-hour, if they played long enough, they'll get a 2-hour highlight reel made. And these guys will put on the music that really gets them going, and they will sit there and they will watch their highlight reel, and they will just jam, just watching it over and over and over and over before each game. That gets their motivation up, and it puts them in the correct mental state.
And I think you've talked about this before, but another thing that also helps is having a sense of accomplishment, i.e., it kind of sets you off on the right foot. And I don't know if you said this or not, or someone else has told me this. He said, you have your daily organizer that talks about the different things you're going to accomplish.
Yes.
And one of them can be as simple as, I made my bed. Now that sounds crazy. Whoop-de-doo. But when you check it off, you go, I accomplished something. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, it may not be a big thing, but it's a start. And sometimes that's what you need, is to get you that little push to get you going. Okay, I've checked one thing off my to-do list for the day. Now let's go on to the second thing. It's more of a primer. It's not like, oh, well, I can rest my laurels. I made my bed. Woohoo. It's just the thought that, okay, it's getting that in mindset to keep going. Okay, you're on a roll. You got one done. Let's get the second one.
Yep. I agree. I totally agree. And there's good science that supports that. It's the one little step that helps. So you just do a little a lot. The tiny little steps make the bigger difference than the big giant leap that you try to make. So, all right. So now you do have to choose what your goal is if you want to even have anything to commit to. And this one, again, motivation, you start with motivation, then you'll be able to figure out how to commit to it. But you got to choose your goal. So here's the biggest thing that people get tripped up in is they're not specific enough. It's too wide. It's too wide. I want to, I want to successfully pass the training event. Okay, that's a goal. Depending on where you're in the sequence, maybe choose something more intermediate to that. Maybe it's got to be, I want to get through this phase in this amount of time, and then I'm going to get in this phase in this amount of time. You need to chunk it down, and you need to be very specific with what that goal is. If it's more just lacking motivation in general or something bigger, then, you have to use some discretion with this. But I think you've got to look never more than 6 to 12 months. It just becomes too esoteric, too non-specific, too vague. So you want to get really, really, really specific.
And I would also say that if you can't do that, then maybe you should question, well, like you said back, why are you doing this? What was the whole purpose of this? Was it because you want it? Because someone else thought that's something you should do? We all change our minds. It's okay to change your mind.
It's okay to grow. It's okay to say that was important to me then, and it's not important to me now. So that is the second step, which is, why do you want the goal? Why?
You told me at some point, some of the things you do end up in cul-de-sacs.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, and I'll let you talk about that, because you talked about that a lot.
We talked about that in a previous episode, when to quit. How do you know when to quit? Well, go back, we'll refer to it, and that was another episode. But if you're in a cul-de-sac, you're like, man, this just keeps winding up in the same place that where there's no growth, or where I just don't want to be. That may be a sign that you've outgrown this, or it's not right. It was right for you then, and it's just not right for you now. That's okay, but you got to get to
your why.
That's your why. You got to get to the why. Write these down. Don't just think them in your head. You've got to write them down. You must write this down. Then, after you've got your why, I think it's important to write out the benefits. What are the benefits of achieving this goal? Just because you say, okay, I want it. This is why I want it. But what are the benefits of it? Get specific. Not just, I just achieved it.
Yeah.
What are the benefits? There's got to be some kind of benefit that you can experience. Then, after you got your benefits, right? Well, we're doing a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah,
what are the costs?
I was going to say, you got to go, what are the costs to get that?
What are you going to give up?
Are you willing to, are those costs, can you live with them?
Can you live with those costs?
People love it's like our contract. People love the pay and all these other stuff.
Right.
I said, I don't want to hear about the benefits, because I'm going to like them. I mean, I do want to hear them, but can I live with the costs? Can I live with the negatives? Because if you can't live with the negatives, I don't care how good the positives are. So I think sometimes the negatives, the costs are actually more important, because you're going to have to live with those too.
Yes.
And if you can't, and you're miserable and you hate it, I don't care how much you want to be a pilot. If you're miserable with all the things that go along with it, you need to rethink where you want to go and what you want to do.
You need to rethink what you want to do. So once you know the costs, then you do the analysis, right? Do the benefits outweigh the costs? And your brain's emotional perception of what you're going to get, your efforts must outweigh the pain, or you won't be able to achieve it. Do your benefits outweigh the costs?
Yep.
Yes, no, maybe.
And it can't be just a financial number.
No, it's not just money comes and goes. You can it's a part of it, but there's also an emotional cost. There's a physical cost.
I'm amazed how many people will do something. It's like if they talk about whether it's law school or doctor or fly. Oh, look, that pays really well, and all of a sudden there's an uptick. So money is part of it, but if that becomes the primary driver, do something. You got to enjoy what you do. And the money is not going to create happiness. It pays bills, but it doesn't make you happy.
Well, there's this finite amount that you can make. I mean, it does it makes things easier, but there's a security point, right? A point where it doesn't really actually give you much more benefit. And there's even a diminishing returns, depending on how you
look at lottery winners.
Oh, that's bad. It's grim. Professional athletes too.
Yeah. That's a whole nother subject.
Yeah. It's like I forget who it was said, "Mo money, mo problems."
And you know what? I think that's a future podcast episode we could talk about.
We could talk about that. There's an interesting book I read about the concept of dying with zero. But okay, let's keep going.
Yep.
once you've got this down and you figured out, all right, this is why I'm doing this. This is what the benefits are. This is the cost. The costs are the benefits are going to outweigh the costs. I think you got to write down a little bit of a mission statement. I am achieving, becoming, fill in the blank in the next 4 to 6 months because why are you doing this? And I know the costs of making these changes are, write them down, which I accept because I'm on a mission to become, insert, and also to become the most successful version of myself. You got to write it down. You got to, and sign it. And with my clients, I make them sign it and I sign it. And then I'm committing to helping them with this. I'm going to do whatever it's going to take to support them on that mission. But they've got to be fully committed to that.
And this isn't just for people that are starting out to do something like to become an airline pilot or become a pilot. These are for people who've achieved things and are moving on to the next, because that you have to have that same mindset. It's, even though you're already an airline pilot, it's okay. You're starting out on whatever it is that you're the next phase.
Yes.
So it's that same, you're just further along the path.
Yep. That's right. At all levels. This is not just, this is like the most successful people that I know. We go through these steps with them.
I could see people going, "Oh, well, that's not for me. I'm already this." No, it's no matter what you do, because that's the new baseline. You're rehacking and starting. Okay, this is now my baseline that I'm starting from. You're not starting from 0. You're starting from 100, but you're moving to 200, whatever the number it is.
That's right. So that's the essence of motivation. And then once you get all that, then we can talk about focus training. We can talk about self-control, discipline, creating algorithms, habits. How do you create habits? How do you create more willpower to support you along the way to create the most effective, streamlined path to achieving that? But without motivation, there's really no point. Nothing is going to work. So I think motivation is it really is, in many respects, is the foundation. You've got to find some motivation that's authentic and not some sort of fake pump up, nonsense. It's got to be really committed on a heart level of why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? These are the costs. I'm accepting the costs because the benefits are going to outweigh the costs. And this is what I'm committing to from a telescopic, long-term and microscopic short-term perspective.
Do you look at commitment as the tool to get you through the inevitable bumps along the road, the low points, the frustrations, where, because it's not always going to be successful. You're going to have something go, oh man, I failed this, or I didn't do as nearly as well, or I got somebody was critical of my performance or whatever it was. Is the commitment the tool that
it's the grit.
Helps you?
It's the grit. It's what keeps the engine going. It's the fuel. And it's necessary because you're going to have times where things aren't going to go the way that you wanted them to. Yep. And you're also going to have times where you don't really feel like doing this. You're like, I don't feel, it's like the podcast. Some days I'm like, I don't feel like doing this. Right. I mean, this is, and then it takes all the work between it. Yeah. And, but I'm like, and I said to you when we started this, right? And I was like, okay, well, let's just start. We'll just go. Yeah. And then when we were talking, I was like, we're going to do one a week. And you were like, what? Are you sure? That's not,
because I knew that there was a lot of commitment.
But I was like, no. I'm going to commit to doing one a week, just to create some commitment to this.
Because and I'm going to sidestep for just a second on the podcast. When I envisioned this, when we were talking, I was thinking of it being a live podcast where it was done, where people would tune in, and the workload is a lot less on that.
It is.
Because here you're doing the editing and you're making sure, and you're getting additional references and stuff. So, when we were starting to talk, I was going, well, this will be, and when you started laying out what your vision was, and I'm like, whoa, that's a lot more work. And it was, and it is.
It is a lot. And there's times where I'm sure both of us are like, oh God, it's like, oh, I just want to sleep. I just want, but it's like, no, we're doing this. We're going to do this. And that's the commitment. But the commitment is the grit to do the things necessary to reach the goal. And so what is the goal of the podcast? It's constantly evolving.
Yep.
But the overarching goal is to provide no cost value at a baseline to people where they're going to get something out of it, and it's going to be for them, and it's just spreading a little bit of love in the world. That's the commitment.
And then to be very frank, I think that's part of what you're saying is where it isn't just about what you and I are getting out of it. It's with the fact that you're giving, and that, right. We don't even know what the impact is on others. I mean, we get some feedback, but there's so many that won't ever respond back. And, this isn't about us, because I can guarantee you, like you said, the time, the effort, there's a lot of other things that we could easily have done, but it's just the fact is that this provides something that I can look back and go, you know what? I feel good about what I did. Yeah. This is a good thing.
Yeah.
And you need to have those kind of things in your life to where you can look and go, you know what? It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about me. Because those help motivate you and put you in that better mindset and state of mind to do other things, because you're going, I have success. I have something that has value, intrinsic value. I can't put a dollar amount on it, but I can put, the fact is that this is something that has value. And I'm so proud of the fact that I've been able to do this with you. And you're right. There are days when I go, I'd rather do this or that. But you know what? This is a good thing.
We're doing
and that's
this
what people
for the
need
community.
To do that.
I care so deeply about, I care deeply about people. I really care deeply about pilots. We are pilots, our community. It's my friends, my colleagues, and we are just lacking in resources. And I think that, but I also care about all the other people that listen. And I'm just, every time I get an email from somebody that's like, wow, that's really amazing that you're tapping into this. I had just a guy that I think actually we're going to bring on the podcast. He's a famous author that's been listening to it, and he writes about stoicism and those kinds of things. And it's just, that's so cool that people are getting something out of it. That's I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's keep going. Keep going.
You have no idea how committed Matt is to this, because he has to look at my ugly mug every single week. Oh my God. That's true commitment.
So damn handsome. So damn handsome.
Yeah. Well, and he's blind. You ought to see the glasses he wears.
Yeah.
But on a serious note, I've been amazed at some of the questions that we have gotten and comments. The depth of some of the stuff, it just amazes me. So, but again, that is part of the commitment, that it kind of recharges your battery and makes you sit there and be motivated when you have those periods when you don't want to do something. You go, if I hadn't done these things, look at all these things that we wouldn't have talked to. And even if it's just one person, that's one more than it would have been otherwise. And, and we obviously had more than one, but those are the kind of things that you have to celebrate, those things, because they'll help with the motivation, and they'll help you get through those rough patches that we all inevitably get, that help you maintain that level of commitment towards whatever it is that you're wanting to achieve. And that can be on anything, committed to a relationship, a job, a hobby, whatever it may be.
Amen to that. A couple of good references there's so much out on motivation and commitment, and I think that there's a few that I really like. Succeed by Heidi Grant Halverson, good book. The Psychology of Achievement by Brian Tracy. I mean, that's kind of like sort of a good one. Even there's one, Go Long by Jerry Rice. Remember the football player, Jerry Rice?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a book called Go Long. Really good book. There's Win or Learn by John Kavanaugh. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. There's a bunch, but there's a few to get started.
And there'll be more when we get our subscriber feed done inside to talk about.
That's right.
So
It's coming.
And we're
I
sorry
promise.
we're sorry. It takes a lot of work and effort, and
there's some, just some last bit pieces that have to be in place before we can launch. But we've got several episodes recorded of interviews, and we're getting ready. So it's coming. I know, it's annoying, but soon.
So what would be the one takeaway from today?
The one takeaway from today would be, I feel like I'm always saying the same thing over and over and over.
But you know what? Sometimes that's what it requires. It's reinforcement. I hate to say it.
I think
if that's what's so important, then that's what it is.
Just get started. Just start. 3, 2, 1, go. And make it smaller. Make the commitment smaller. That will take you much bigger.
And specific.
Yeah, specific and small. Little small. Small. It's like, I'm going to floss one tooth, right? Well, guess what? You'll probably do more when you're there. But if you can at least do one, that's a win. It
sounds so corny to say the longest journey starts with the first step.
It does. It's true. Damn it. Those philosophers were right.
Yeah. That's why he keeps me around. It's just, that's such a sage. What can I say?
Such a sage.
As always, we thank you. We appreciate you being here. Matt was right. Please hit the like button, because this is what allows us to get more visibility. We can't emphasize that enough. That's so important to us, because we want to increase our reach out to everybody. We look forward to seeing you on our next podcast. Until then, get some sleep, get motivated, stay motivated, be committed to whatever it is that you want to achieve, because you can achieve it. And we're here for you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the LiftAffect podcast. If you want to dive deeper into this episode and every episode, go to our website, LiftAffect.com/podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we would love it if you'd follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate your support. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all with the ID Matthew McNeil. This show is brought to you by LiftAffect, a clinical mental health and consulting company that assists air carriers, corporate flight departments, pilot unions, and commercial pilots by providing comprehensive psychotherapy and mental skills coaching services to pilots with mental health and mental performance-related issues. Visit LiftAffect.com, that's LiftAffect.com, to book your free consultation. And finally, this podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of counseling, psychotherapy, medicine, or any other healthcare service, including the giving of medical advice. No therapeutic or provider-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and any materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining advice for any psychological or medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the LiftAffect podcast.